different questions. First one, if you know personally Mrs. Aquino. The second, what do you think about the person who is afraid about the return of the body of the president in the mainland?
I never had the privilege of knowing Mrs. Aquino. I met her once, I remember, in the heart center when I visited her husband that took him 2 hours after for a medical operation in the United States. She was there to serve some refreshment and what was all. That's the only thing. In fact, the president never had the privilege of meeting her. And so there is not much I know about Mrs. Aquino except of her statements and her treatment towards us. And again, just like since we are talking about the presidency and leaders of a country, eventually the great judge is history, because history will judge a person not because of what people say or write about her. Eventually, history will judge her as to what she has done. And I hope that this great inhumanity of a man not even left to rest in his home country will be rectified soon, because poor Mrs. Aquino will be the victim and not Marcos. Because what is coming out now, that Marcos is now symbolizing what is right, what is good, what is even legitimate, that she's so afraid of. And the problem sometimes with death, the predominant part of you is enhanced in death. And in the stature of the president, who had been president for 20 years, he becomes a symbol of injustice, of oppression, of tyranny, of man's inhumanity to man. And the deprivation of a motherland. And all of these things that bring martyrdom to people. And so he has become a symbol for this man's inhumanity to man. And this outrageous people's, not only of our country, but of the world, becomes a common denominator because it is something very personal and very human. Everybody dies. Everybody has a country. Everybody has feelings. So, I really pray that Aquino, Mrs. Aquino, will bring Marcos home, because not only for Marcos, not only for the Filipino people, but for herself, the media that had quite changed this in almost 20 years of Marcos, suddenly Marcos, in a very even short time, was completely the reverse, because we never heard these things being said to us, not never, but this was not the predominant theme for that corruption, criminal acts, and all of these things, racketeering. Suddenly, it just evolved. And this is coming from, first of all, the media that has really very little time to just see the black and white, the yin and the yang, and not the rainbow that every human being tries to make out of his and her life and the world that they live in. And so with that perception also, and politicians and leaders of the world has also the reality of a specific time frame of their leadership, have to rely on this information and of course ending what is fashionable. But we know what is not fashionable is not really always what is classic. And the fashion at this point in time is a very materialistic world. How we can get justice, not because the Americans are unjust or the United States is an unjust system. It is only because we are premising from a different truth. Like it is true at one given moment, like now, let us say, it is 12 o'clock p.m. in the United States of America. And it is 12 o'clock a.m. in the Republic of the Philippines. And this is the truth at that very single moment and second. It is 12 a.m. in the Philippines and 12 p.m. in the United States. And that is the truth. Now, how can I tell the truth when you know it is black, you know it is dark, you know it is night, and I say, yes, it is white, and yes, it is day, and yes, this is light. You will not believe me because you see it from a different light. You see it from a different country, a different culture, different institutions, different laws, different procedure, different system, but worse, different culture, different climate, different place. Completely different culture. We don't even have the jury system. Members of the jury who did not have to do, who were not authorized, and who were not empowered to rule a country that would live with the rest of the family of nations. When you have juries who have maybe even doctors, lawyers, PhDs and all of that, or truck drivers, or porters, or waiters and all of that, members of the jury, how can they judge a president for 20 years of a third world country of a different culture? And even if we put all the former presidents and the incumbent president as members of the jury to judge Marcos, it's a different thing altogether. To rule a big nation and a small nation. To rule a very rich country and a poor developing country. To rule, in short, a country of different culture is different. And so you cannot even judge the president, really judge truthfully and honestly the president before you. And how much more to judge someone who has never been your peer. or one of your race. So, the matter of jurisdiction, a matter of neutrality, a question of we are an independent country from no less than the United States of America. We were given an independence in 1946. This is the reason why the Filipino people then, during World War II, we had 17 million people. 1 million died in that war. Double that of the death that occurred for the United States Armed Forces and government during the time. And we were a small population. But we fought valiantly, and our men valiantly, and Marcos was in the forefront of that because he was the most decorated soldier at World War II, and waiting for his the truth to prevail. Justice prevail, which is rightfully ours, both divine and human. And as a believer, I know the truth will prevail because God is on the side of the truth. And when Ferdinand was very, very sick, he used to say to me, and he was worried for me, I was quite apprehensive about my situation. He would always tell me, he said, the truth will set us free. Don't worry, he said. All our lives we committed ourselves to the right, and God is on the side of the right, and the truth and the right will vindicate us. And so this is the strength and the peace within that has carried me to this day. Because really, when the president passed away, I really thought that when he went away, I would just collapse. It was my life, this was my world, it was my great love. And when he passed away, and before this happened, the 10 months of vigil by his side in the intensive care of the hospital, I was always afraid of the very moment he would pass away, when the moment of truth would come before that he would pass away. And funny, when the moment came, it was a moment of glorious exaltation in great thanksgiving to the Lord Almighty for having blessed me for 35 years with a great human being, for that privilege. So I said, Lord, thank you, thank you, thank you. In fact, it was only the third day, when every day I would wake up, it was not there. It was not even there sick. So that was the only time I started to cry. But even then, somehow if the man had been a beautiful human being, a good person, a righteous man, every given truth that surfaces within the day, every beautiful thing that occurs, every given moment of beauty and love that arises, then you know he is alive, he is not dead. The great legacy of righteousness, the great legacy of love, enlightenment, justice, humanity, all of this, Ferdinand is again alive. And so, there being God all the time, there will always be justice, there will always be good, there will always be nice people, friends and all of that, then it will always be there. Of course, once in a while, you are human, you are physical, you our mother. And so I go to the Valley of the Temples to see where he is in temporary rest, before hopefully God will bless us with a miracle that he will be brought home. I know that if mankind will not give him justice, the Lord will perform a miracle that will bring him home. And in the event that Ferdinand is brought home and put to rest in his beloved motherland, where he will be in great embrace in his beautiful country, the Philippines, where even in death he shall embrace a country between the Pacific Ocean and the China Sea. And when I know that his remains will be in eternal rest, physically, materially within his country, in the midst of the world, then I, with the great legacy of freedom, justice, and democracy, now try to perpetuate this. In our people, bring peace and reconciliation to everyone, and hopefully bring peace and order in our country, that this nation can stand up again and once again walk shoulder to shoulder with all of mankind in dignity and in honor as a member of a free world that seeks quality of life for every human being and peace in every man and in every country. We can always make a start. And what little experience I have and the great legacy that I have from the President, I shall give to my fellow human being. And it will not be officially, because I think I have had enough politics. Because they say, well, it is for cause of people, it is politics. But you can still be with people without politics, because politics institutionalize love, institutionalize the giving, the serving. You can serve without politics. You serve because you love. And the other name for love is giving, serving, working. The opposite of love is not hate, it is selfishness. So now that Ferdinand has passed away and not passed away, I will continue to serve the bigger Ferdinand, the Filipino people, just as privately as before, just as deeply and profound as before. And now I have full concentration now for my fellow human being, to the Filipino people. And that great intensity and that deep love symbolized by Ferdinand will now be real in my countrymen and my fellow human being. And talking about politics, I'm continuously asked by this politics. I was running for a position. I hope not, I pray not. So that whatever I do, I feel I have to do, and my priorities will not be curtailed, and I shall not be suspect that I'm doing this because for a position. And I do not want to take away my freedom. I have to do this because this has to be done first. This is the priority, this is the protocol. me. The priority, more than even rationality, for me has been the priority of the heart, the feeling of love. Power is never used, it's only felt. It's like a gun with 1,000 bullets. The moment you use that gun once, it's no longer 1,000 bullets, it's already 999 bullets. So how can this man be bad? Yes, he was rich, he became very rich. Yes, he became very powerful, 20 years. Yes, he had all of this power. Because of his love, he went, when you go intensity to infinity, it is extravagance of the highest order and excessiveness of the highest order. And yet that extravagance was not used against man. It was used for man. Then that is the life of this man. It's not just the peripheral and so what was so very touching about this man, everything in his body failed. His heart, his lungs, his kidneys, his liver, his pancreas, his name it, every single organ, every other day we were told this is going to be this is going to be that, this is going to be this. There was only one thing that will not fail him, his spirit. And to the last few seconds, 5 minutes, I said, Ferdinand, Bonbon is here. It was very touching. Bonbon's here. All the doctors were gone. Your son is here, Bonbon. Immediately opened his eyes. He looked around. So first saw Bonbon. Looked, he saw me, he saw his daughter, he saw his family. And then he smiled, and then my family was there. He closed his eyes, gone, finished. And Bonbon, like a miracle, was starting to, it was like, I give you my legacy. I give you me. You are now to be born from me. I die as you live. That is not my motherland where I grew up and was born. It's still a question, a big question in the minds and in the hearts, not only of the family and myself, but the world in general. Why am I here? I was destined by the good Lord to be born in my country, the Philippines. And the reason for this commitment and obsession for a going home of the MARCOS to the Philippines is not only a matter of human right that I want to do this. It is an obligation, it is a responsibility to God. It is a pursuit of a divine will and divine right to do what is right and to bring him home where he can have eternal rest in his motherland. And this has been a question on the MARCOS minds and those who are loyal to the vision, the principles, the goals that we have been committing ourselves and to millions of Filipinos. Why are the MARCOSes here? This started some years ago, over 4 years ago, when we had problems, economic problem, because of the ideological difference in the Philippines. The Philippines being a very strategic geographic position where we are very close to communist, Vietnam, China, Russia, all of this. And our country being a country that has been exposed to Western civilization, there has been this continuous conflict of ideologies, conflict of the rich and poor, the feudal system of the very rich that was used really by our colonizers to rule the colony. And with all of these divisions of mankind, economic, social, political, religious, there was our problem in Mindanao between the Muslims and the Christians, wherein I had to go to Mindanao, to Tripoli, to, to, to help bring about a ceasefire agreement from Libya. There was a continuous conflict in all levels. And Ferdinand Marcos, being president of that country, in trying to look for a balance of the left and the right, the north and the south, the rich and the poor, and having alienated and having affiliated himself with the free world, now was even misunderstood by the free world in his act while he was trying to balance, and was completely misunderstood. To a point that one day, after he was asked that perhaps it seems that there is a lot of trouble in the Philippines, the immediate problem was you, Marcos, because you are not popular maybe anymore. You are not loved by your people and endorsed by your people. And so even if Ferdinand was elected in 81 to be president for 6 years up to 1987 June, on February 86, he accepted the challenge to submit himself to the public and the people. And true enough, he won in that election. He was proclaimed by the duly instituted office, the COMELEC, the Commission on Election. He was proclaimed by Parliament, the Batasan Pambansa, the duly instituted body that was to proclaim the winner of the election. And he even took his oath of office as president. And yet, he won in the election, and yet a group of so-called reformists in the military, and then later on succeeded by the Chief of Staff, General Ramos, and the National Defense Minister came in to bring about the coup. The coup was aborted, and Ramos and Enrile were held in a camp in the Philippines. And yes, they said there was people power because Cardinal Sin came in. They just came in to call for people power, but the claim was people power. But you can see now that it was more a media event because it was a focusing of the media to a group of people, not really the amount of people that there was. And so there was, he won in that election, but at the same time, he also was able to abort the coup because they were put there with not so many people, and supposedly helping him then, but there was the military there that could contend with that. And documentary pictures will show this eventually. But what really made us accept to ride in the US Air Force plane, in a helicopter, was when we were being attacked by rockets that did not belong to the Philippine Armed Forces inventory. They were using Philippine planes, seemingly we were being attacked by Filipinos, but in truth and in fact, the arms used there did not belong to the armory of the Republic of the Philippines. And so, even if earlier the chief of the CIA then and Mrs. Reagan was inviting us to the United States, I told Mrs. Reagan, and she was inviting us for security to come to the United States. I said, thank you, madam. I said, but now that my country is in trouble, Ferdinand and I will be the last person to leave our country. But soon afterwards, when we were being attacked by rockets, the president finally and I, seeing my children and grandchildren's life being endangered, we may be ready to give our lives for our country, but the children did not yet have the will. And so we asked the children, my daughter and my son, to leave us and bring the children out, but they would not leave their parents behind in the palace. So finally, we accepted to ride the U.S. helicopter to go to Clark. And when we were in Clark Air Base, which is about 40 minutes by helicopter from the palace to Clark Air Base, when we were there, very soon after we were told if there's work, we had to get out of the Clark Air Base, because now Clark Air Base was being surrounded by Filipino communists, and we were a danger being there. So the president said, so bring us then to Ilocos Norte, Tawai, my home province. And so I prepared a plane, and me seeing the plane was quite small, so I was getting already a little suspicious. My woman instinct was saying I was going to feel danger. I looked at the plane, but the plane was small, so I said this cannot go trans-Pacific. And going to the Pacific from Manila to Honolulu alone would be about 10 to 12 hours. So I said, looking at this small plane, I said, this will not bring us out of the country very far. They must be honest bringing us to Ilocos, which is a small plane, which is only about an hour at the most away. True enough, we got into the plane, thinking we'd be brought to Ilocos. 1 hour passed by, 2 hours passed by. So, that's a little, but meanwhile, the president was not too well, so I was very disturbed more about him than the length of this time. But after about 3 hours over, I said, where are we going? This is 3 hours already. And I don't see us landing yet. True enough, it was becoming dawn and we were going down, and I was looking down. It was an island. It was not an island that looked like any of the islands of the Philippines. I am very knowledgeable, and I am very familiar to our terrain of our country, even from air, because I campaigned in the 7,150 islands of my country. And so as we were going down, he said, the general said, we are going down because we are going down to Guam, because we could not land in Ilocos Norte because there are communists that is ready to attack us. They're waiting for us in Ilocos. So this is terrible. Then I leave. And so the others, history from Guam, because the president got very sick and he had a high fever. And so I said, just bring us to any place where there is a first-class hospital. And right away, the sooner we get him there, the better. So yeah, the thing was to Hawaii. And when we got to Hawaii, we were brought in Hicam Air Base, and we stayed there for over 1 month. And we were in a cottage, half of which was a group of people from the Philippine Embassy and the military, the State Department, that was watching and hovering over us. And the 90+ members of the staff and the family was in the barracks of Hicam. And I remember we used to the president used to walk for several meters away at the clubhouse for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But it was a very humiliating time, a very depriving time, because our things, our valuables had not come in. And it was a very difficult time because we did not even have our things, our personal effects, to a point that even as early as in Guam and in Honolulu, in Hawaii, we had go to PX for things like toothbrush, toothpaste, milk for the children, diapers, and all of this. And we had no money because all of our things were deprived us. And whatever money we had was peso bills. We had no dollar. I did not even have a single dollar because we were of no intent of going anywhere but our country. And to this day, we are still wondering why we are here in the United States. And worse, after 3 weeks, when Ferdinand was starting to be without fever anymore, and he was starting to be stronger, and he was even able to jog a bit, going to back and forth to the cottage down to the officers' club for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They started to see that Marcos was getting stronger. After a few weeks at Hicam Air Base here in Hawaii, when the president was starting to gain more vigor and health, and he was no longer with high fever, so he was taken out of the Philippines. There was a big demand for the Filipino community. We had a big community in Hawaii of Filipinos that wanted to meet with him. And also the media. Finally, those who were taking care of us inside could not resist but had to make us go to a press conference. In that press conference, there was a prepared statement agreed upon by now our the people who was in charge of us, that they would make a certain statement. And as I look back to it, it was made to look like we had fled the country, that we had gone out of our country and not received out of our country. Because it was not our will and our desire to leave the Philippines. And so, but as the president gained more health and vigor, and there was more pressure to know what was going on. So, in the next few days, we were descended upon of suits after suits after suits and after suits, until all of us were sued for one thing or another, from smuggling to criminal acts or whatever, all kinds of cases, including my grandchildren. I had 4 grandchildren then, and the eldest was the only one who could walk. The 3 could hardly walk. They were so young, and yet we had smuggling cases against them. And children of our staff, there were 40, were also included in that smuggling cases. So, we were taken out of the Philippines against our will. We came to the United States not in a Philippine Air Force plane or our own private plane, which we had 2 even before Marcos became president. We did not ride in our own personal plane. We were taken in a US Air Force plane. This is the story why we are here. And it's also still an obsession because it becomes more overwhelming irrational, illegal, inhuman, immoral, now that the president is no longer with us physically. And even the authorities here have said to me, when he had a medical severance, that while Ferdinand Marcos is still alive, we have jurisdiction over him. But the moment, this was in April, when I asked the immigration chief then, but the moment he passes away, we have no longer any jurisdiction over his remains, for no government has jurisdiction over the remains of any dead human being. So when the time came, at 12:40, I remember Ferdinand passed away September 28, 89. We had not even come back to bring his body from the mortuary that was prepared for his lying state in the house. At about 5, 6 in the morning, we had a wire coming from our lawyer saying that the Federal Aviation Board would disallow to have any carrier or U.S. carrier bring the remains of Marcos home. I had not yet really even begun the overwhelming grief of a loss, but I had to again face the shock of another inhumanity. So this is the cause we are fighting for. Not only for justice, for freedom, not only for man's right to all of these great principles for justice, freedom, and democracy, but we are fighting for a divine right, a divine will, that the Philippines be our motherland, and it is in the Philippines that we can call our home. And it is only in the Philippines that Ferdinand Marcos can lie in peace, in eternal peace. On my birthday, he apparently had always was having things made for me long before I would celebrate my birthday. And so on my last birthday, last July the 2nd, he gave me this. And it was so touching because he could hardly write my name. He could hardly scribble his feelings. It's my last birthday gift from Ferdinand, last July the 2nd, wherein in all his physical weakness, he wrote with his eyes closed, struggling. Here, meaning Imelda, I love you, Ferdinand.